welcome back. Today I'm going to do the What the Hell Is This Fun Crazy Movies bundle, which is because it's the end of the year, instead of doing a video about another film that is very, very flawed, in some cases terrible, in some cases fun for its flaws, instead of just looking at some crazy films that are mostly enjoyable, all these films I'd say definitely check out. Some are better than others. There are some, it's just that thing of some have a bit more offensiveness, some are a bit more crazy, but all of them are worth seeing. But if you're sensitive, one or two of them might offend you. So there we go. So I'm going to start off with the most good-natured one, which is Hundreds of Beavers. Hundreds of Beavers is available. You can catch it now on the streaming services like Amazon and iTunes. I think it's going to get physical releases next year. It is wonderful. You probably have heard about it by now if you're in the kind of film fandom community. Really, it's just one of those films that's become known. It's a silent movie, apart from one or two comments, really. But it's a words rather than massive dialogue. It mainly does silent movie things and reactions, and it's black and white, and there's lots of special effects for flat background. It's all done very cartoonishly, and it's done in a style that loves the old style Buster Keaton, that kind of movie, but it's also got the logic of a Looney Tunes film with set up payoff gags. I mean, the lead character was basically Wile E. Coyote for a good section of the film. So it's about this guy who was he used to make beer, but he got too high in his own supply, to put it mildly, and his then his home and his entire crop were burnt down because of actual stupidity. And so to survive, he becomes a hunter of beavers and all these other animals. But all these beavers, every animal is basically a human being dressed up in a suit, so that you know it's not an animal, it's actually a human being underneath the suits. And when you die and you open up the animal, you see human skeletons inside, which makes it just all the funnier. And there's even other jokes later on that twist that in strange ways that I won't explain. It's just best to see for yourself. And basically, you're watching him slowly become a hunter, but it's basically a gag fest. Every minute is about 3 or 4 gags, and it's constant moving forward, gag, and it's really charming. And it's about an hour 45, and you think, how can you keep this up? Because it's hilarious from the start, but it's how are you going to keep this up for over an hour and 45 minutes? And they manage it, because they keep on changing the style, because it's like, just as one kind of plot line starts to think, okay, you've kind of run this into the ground and move to something else, and moves the character forward. So there's actually a story to it. Very simple story, very silent movie type of story, but there is a story you can follow. But within that story, you get a lot of gags. You get tons and tons of gags, and a very frame breaking at times. A lot of visuals, mainly visual gags, because there's no sound apart from the music and the sound effects. But there's no actual dialogue, and it just becomes this non-stop barrage of jokes at the expense of the hero. And it's just so inventively done. Like, the team made it did Lake Michigan Monster, which is a film which I have but haven't watched. I didn't know it was the same team that did both these films until like yesterday. So I will be watching that over the holidays. So I'm sure I'll talk about it then. But yeah, Hundreds of Beavers, go watch. I don't want to say too much more because I want people to go see it. Right. Next up is Taxi Hunter, from the team who made Ebola Syndrome and The Untold Story, which were both much more offensive and I thought more enjoyable films than Taxi Hunter. Taxi Hunter is probably the least distinctive of these films in this set, but it's still worth seeing because the premise is really good. But it's one of those films that you wish they'd gone further, because they'd made some category 3 Hong Kong films, which category 3 was really offensive films. Like Ebola Syndrome was a really offensive film about a guy with Ebola using it to kill his enemies so that they get sick. And an untold story is about a guy who is basically a Sweeney Todd thing, who a guy who kills people and uses their bodies in the pies. Basically a serial killer making use of the meat. And Taxi Hunter's about a guy whose wife dies because of what done by a taxi driver who wouldn't pick her up and get to the hospital in time. So he goes mad. It's played by Anthony Wong, who's a star, who's a villain in these other two films, and who can be relied on at that time in his career to do extreme parts. So the guy decides to get revenge. One night he's drunk and he kills a taxi driver and decides to get revenge, to work out and actually start killing these taxi drivers. He's got a friend who's a cop who eventually figures out it's him. And the problem with the film is it's very predictable. You know the cop's going to find out it's him. And these other films they made, Ebola Syndrome and Toy Story. Both these films had like lame like side stories to get the running time up, but in this one it's the side story is not as lame, but the actual main story is not as extreme. Like Wong plays it really well. He does what he can with the part, but it's an underwritten part, and he's a nice guy character who turns bad, kind of. He doesn't go fully insane, nor do the scenes get fully insane. Even the scene when his wife dies, you'd expect something more extreme from this team. And some of the deaths, you'd expect something more extreme with this team. It just becomes this thing of, I wanted more because I'd seen other films. I think if you haven't seen other films, this film is pretty entertaining. And it is well done, but if you know the other films, it's like, it's okay, but it's not quite as good, it's quite as nasty as other films. But it's still enjoyable, I still recommend it. You know, the villains have it coming, and it's a nice extreme version of the Death Wish story, where the guy really says sorry to people and all these other things, even as he's been a psycho. It's like this meat guy who never loses the meekness. That's the funny part, but it's like, wish you'd gone further with that. Wish you'd gone much further. Like, cut down the early part, have him go psycho earlier and have more deaths, it would have worked better. But still, fun. Now we go to a film, Robotrix, which has no, in any sense, has no subtlety. This is, I've got to admit, I may have been a bit drunk watching this film. So, but I think that's the perfect way to watch the film. It is about these, the Japanese have made these robots that can look like humans. Because this was just after Robocop and all these other cyberpunk things. They look like humans, and they'll try to hunt down this other scientist who's proved his brain into this other robot that looks like a human being. And it's very Terminator-ish. And basically, he's found ways to kill people, and he's keeping the son of a sheik hostage, and he's going to kill him if he doesn't get certain things. The cops have to find out who he is. So in the early part of the film, this female cop gets shot and killed. She ends up waking up in the body of a robot, because you have to transfer these characters' personality to the robot and their memories for it to work. And so now she's a robot, and she's trying to hide that fact from her boyfriend. And so it's that kind of silliness. The whole film is silly. The film is knowingly silly and violent and stupid, and it has some of the more offensive supporting characters in a film. The cops are all useless and lewd and terrible. I mean, in Taxi Hunter, the big joke is the taxi drivers are awful people who deserve to die. In this film, Robotrix, the cops who are meant to be heroes are worse than the taxi drivers from this other film. They're far more offensive than the taxi drivers. But that's not a complaint, it's just fun watching these awful characters in this film. And the downside is there was some dark moments. There was a rape scene that goes on way too long, that's with a robot and a woman that's like what were you thinking? I mean, it's one of the things you never see now. It's just like, yeah, this is a really offensive scene. And there's another scene later on where another sexual attack on the scientist who built the thing by this robot killer. And it's like, you don't need them in the film. But it's like, that's why that's a category 3 film. But mixing that with some of the stupidity and the silliness and the nudity on the other parts of the film makes you think the director or the writer needs 24/7 psychiatric care. You know, someone needs to see a therapist because it's so weird. It's just so weird, and the whole film is just weird. Like, the action scenes are less important to the people than the actual, the kind of weird sexual smutty scenes. Like, they're much more into that than they are into the actual action scenes, and it's a strange film. But it is. I didn't know what the hell is this film. And it is entertaining, even though there are times you're thinking, what am I watching? Why are they doing this? This is just insane. But they keep going, they keep moving. It's like, okay, this is just weird. So Robotrix, I'm not sure if it's recommended or not. It's something, if you have a strong stomach, you should see just to experience it. Okay, now we're going to Frankie Freako, which is a film that's from the people who made Psycho Gorman a few years ago. This is not as good as Psycho Gorman. It just isn't. It's a nostalgic thing where it's looking back to the 80s films where you have a guy who's repressed, and he's a workaholic who doesn't understand, you know, human interaction. He's just like on the spectrum in some way. He's so into his 80s stuff, and he thinks he's cool, but he's not. He's just a square. And his boss is going to set him up to take the fall for financial irregularities, and he's too dumb to realise. But he's left at home by his wife one night, and there's an advert for Frankie Freako, this thing that'll make your life better. And he's bored, and he just calls a number up. And all this is done in a very overdone, campy way. It's trying to be a bit John Watersy, but not quite as edgy. And it's a bit annoying, because the acting's a bit over the top for what you need for this. Like in Psycho Gorman, the acting was over the top, but it was appropriate for the film. And this one, it feels it's a step above. And the big problem with the first half of the film is everything else feels a step above what it needs to be effective. So Frankie Freako are these small people in these prosthetic suits, are big partiers, and you get a big bunch of party scenes. And in this early part of the film, which are kind of fun but not amazing, but it's such a strange film. It's like you're kind of impressed by how weird it is and just how far they're going for it. The second half of the film, where they deal with the boss who's trying to set him up, and the boss gets dealt with in some unique ways, and then they introduce a villain who's out to get Frankie Freako, and they end up going to Frankie Freako's home and finding his backstory. That's a lot more fun. That's when it gets like, okay, there's a story now, there's stakes, there's even the very basic stakes. The humour works a lot better, the weirdness fits in with the world a lot better. But it's still, you have to get through that. It's fairly short running time, but you still get through that first half of the film where everything's just overdone. And that's kind of the interesting part of the film, but also this big downfall where it's like, you're overdoing it. But I'd much rather watch that than a lot of kind of more supposedly normal films that are very bland. I'd rather have something weird that maybe is pitched slightly wrong, but eventually they get it right. And it's like, well, this is a difficult second film. They did Psycho Gorman, which is great, and done this one. Hopefully the third film they'll find the right balance again. But it's still recommended because it's weird. It's still a strange film that you probably have some fun with, because there are some good stuff in it. Now we get to Let's Start a Cult, which, you know, along with Hundreds of Beavers, is probably my favourite of these films. This is the last one I'm covering for this bundle. And this is a story of a cult leader who is leading a suicide cult, and he's got this guy in the cult, this fat guy who's absolutely useless, who is sent away to send a video to explain the reason for the suicide to the outside world. And because this guy has annoyed everyone so much, they decide to do the suicide without him, to leave him, have him feel left out. So the guy comes back and finds everyone dead, and he's like, oh, and he goes and runs away, goes back to his family, and alienates them for the next 3 months. And then suddenly, when he's wandering around trying to find out what to do with his life, he sees this guy who looks exactly like the cult leader. And it turns out it is a cult leader who did not die. Now this guy is so stupid, this fat guy is so stupid, he thinks his presence brought the guy back to life. When in fact the guy was never going to commit suicide, he was letting other people commit suicide and was going to fake his own death. So, but because the tape wasn't, because the fat guy forgot to actually messed up sending the tape, no one knows that. They just found the bodies much later. So, it's all messed up. So the guy who escaped blackmails the cult leader, saying, I'll tell on you, but we don't start another cult and do it right this time. So they start a new cult, and that's the film, Let's Start a Cult. And then basically it's about them getting new recruits for this suicide cult. But none of these people know they're going into a suicide cult. They think they're going into a cult that's... because they're all like alienated from life, they've all got problems. There's a guy who wants to join the army, but he's failed completely at it and doesn't know what to do with his life, so he joins their cult. There's this woman who's feels that she's mentally disturbed in lots of ways. She's been taken away from her son, and they find her at this venue where she's insulting the person speaking, and she seems perfect. There's this other guy who's strange, who is first introduced from getting out of their boot of the car, and it's just these weird selection of characters. So they've got this weird plot of we're going to be a suicide cult, but you've also got the weird interactions, and which is what the film works. It's just these weird characters interacting with each other. So you've got the guy who was the leader of the cult, who's the villain of the piece, and who's snidey and who's manipulative. You've got his innocent, or protagonist who's innocent but really stupid. The film enjoys the fact that he's really stupid, and he's allowed energy to the film. And the good thing with that is, the people who made the film understand that he can do the energetic stuff, and everyone else can be much more low key and get a lot of the laughs around him, against him, basically, by commenting him and by being weird themselves. So he's so weird, it makes the other weird characters work because they're not too extreme. So they become the human characters who can end up pulling him back to humanity. And it just works, like because your lead actor, who's also one of the writers, knows what his function is in the story. It's a well-placed story. It's like in a way that Frankie Freako didn't quite understand his own balance. This one does. Is like, this is a character who is intentionally annoying, but he makes you understand other characters. And then at a certain point, we're going to pull him back and have him like realise he's been annoying and he's been insane. It doesn't make him sane after that. It just means he's a much more identifiable character. They end up at this home with this ex-wrestler woman who suddenly becomes passionate about them. There's another sequence where they're at a trailer park where a lot of the interactions happen that humanise the characters, where CM Punk shows up, the wrestler CM Punk shows up. So this is made by wrestling fans, obviously, as a character. Now, Punk's been shown up in certain films recently. This one, he's probably the least successful of the group, in a sense, because he's doing this accent that's a bit weird and doesn't quite work. His reactions are fine, but the accent's just odd, and compared to how expert these other supporting characters are, it makes them stick out a little bit. So it's just a case of someone should have said, tone that down a little bit, just a little bit, tone it down slightly. It's not really overdone, it's just slightly. It's just the one that's directing things. Someone should have said, pull it back a little bit, the accent. You know, not much, because it's meant to be a goofy guy who's not particularly bright, but it's played just a touch too much. But he's getting better at acting as you see him in more stuff, though. It's just like one of those things, like, that was a direction thing. Someone was directing to pull it down slightly. But I think I could have thought that's an energetic character, we should make him broad, when it was like, you don't need him that broad. But everything pays off in the film at the end. Everything kind of comes together in fun ways that are satisfying. So it's another really satisfying film. I really enjoyed it. It was really well done. Again, like Hundreds of Beavers and that are the two that I definitely say give a shot. They're smart in the stupidity. The other three films are, you might like them, you might not, but they're very strange films. You know, Frankie Freako is the most extreme for weirdness, and Robotrix is the most extreme for offensiveness, and Taxi Hunter is the one which is a bit more extreme for offensiveness. But yeah, hopefully there's stuff here that you'll be interested in. I enjoyed all the films despite their flaws. It just was like a case of some could have been better than others. So, you know, some of them never lived up to potential, but they're all kind of interesting in their own way. And I'm sure when I see Taxi Hunter again, knowing what it is rather than what I would want it to be, it'll be fine. I think it's some of what I say is my expectations from Ebola Syndrome and, you know, Untold Story, which are high watermarks for offensive cinema. So I hope you enjoyed the video. I'll see you all later. I've still got a best of to do, and I've got a podcast still, but mainly this is me for the year.